1-0.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Map Round Show. This is the Built in New York series, and with me on the line is an amazing founder, visionary, doing cool things in the agricultural industry or farming industry, which we're going to get into. Her name is Brandi DeCarli, and she is the co-founder and CEO of Farm in a Box, farminabox.com. Welcome to the show, Brandi.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here, Matt.
No, it's great to finally have you here after a few hoop jumping episodes between us, but we are here nonetheless. So you are really doing something I believe as truly innovative, but not only is it innovative, it's sorely needed for humanity. So we're going to get into all of that, but for our viewers around the world, Brandi, who haven't heard about you or maybe seen some of your TED Talks or what have you, why don't you give us a little bit about your background and give us the elevator pitch to Farm in a Box? What are you up to?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the intro on that. I think at a foundational level, food is core to all of us. And as we've even experienced just during COVID-19, the access that we have to it is also vitally, vitally important, especially on that local level. Pair that together with climate change, and our food system is really changing rapidly. So, what we're doing with Farm from a Box is we're working to really strengthen what local and regional food systems can produce by creating this toolkit that can help stabilize good, reliable production much more sustainably. And we're specifically talking about outdoor regenerative crop production. So we're also not limited by the type of crops that we can grow. So that opens up all kinds of possibilities when it comes to nutritional security, to market access, and to different areas that we're working in.
Mm-hmm. So I've got your website up for everybody. So if you want to get a visual on what Brandi is going to be talking about next, which is literally a farm in a box, head on over to head on over to the YouTube channel if you're catching this on audio only. So Brandi, what is the problem here? I know you touched on a few of it, but give us the size of this problem. Like, what is it, and how big is the opportunity here?
Oh my gosh. Well, here's a few different things that have been happening within the agricultural realm. We started off with having localized community level growers. And then with industrialization, we started to expand to these much larger farms. With that came all of these advancements, technological advancements of how do we increase efficiencies. But a lot of those efficiencies, as we now know, have really left an incredible amount of environmental damage in these areas where these large farms are. Pair that together with the fact that it's also um, made local farms really kind of disappear. So we have this broad gap between these large farms, this very centralized food system, and these small level growers. The small level growers, who are really the backbone of our global food system, don't necessarily get access to the technologies that can help stabilize their production, especially in the face of climate change. So when rains are not arriving the way that they used to, and we're facing record levels of drought globally, all the way to California, to the East Coast, it doesn't matter. This is what we're dealing with these days. We have to have these infrastructural support systems to really be able to help stabilize good, efficient, reliable production and close some of those yield gaps so that we don't have those big high peaks and valleys of what production is. So what we tried to really do is say, okay, let's put all of those clean, sustainable technologies in one modular system that can be delivered to an area and basically have it act as a bit of a Swiss Army knife, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Off-grid pumping, off-grid power, drip irrigation, internal cold storage. I'm glad you brought up the website, because sometimes when you think about all of these things in combination, it can be a little bit hard to picture as what that would look like in one modular unit.
So I love the concept of this, but I guess I'm a great believer in timing, and there's also a lot of lip service just in general. I would suggest around offsetting carbon footprints, carbon credits. There was this whole series like John Oliver did on carbon credits and how lip service is being being made in general on the sort of private sector. And then you've got the macroeconomic drivers of this solution, or the need for this solution. For instance, there's obviously climate change and things like this, more frequent and severe droughts, efficient water management, and how much lip service, because you're in the space, how much lip service is there around the need for solutions like this?
Well, I just returned back from speaking at COP27, and I was active at COP26 last year as well. So suffice it to say, there is a lot of lip service, and there is also a lot of innovation that's happening in the space. Back when we first came up with this concept, we were probably pretty early into the game. It was right when regenerative agriculture, as we call regenerative, very nature-based, soil positive outdoor farming, was really kind of coming into the conversation. And now it's kind of commonplace that you start actually seeing consumer products in the grocery store talking about how it was grown using regenerative farming techniques. So there's it's a little bit of a spectrum. There's a lot of lip service, and there's a lot of companies and farmers that are really doing the work and doing some monumental changes too. So it all comes down to the metrics, down to really having that impact, because there's definitely a lot of talk in this space.
Mm-hmm.
But the good thing is there's a lot of change that's happening too.
Yeah, exactly. So what is being discussed at COP, for instance? Like, what does a general conversation look like over there?
It was a little bit interesting because last year I found that the conversation, interestingly enough, was really around the realities of what we're facing and some of the potential choices that we're really going to have to make with the future that we're looking at if we stay on this trajectory, which is mass climate migrations. Certainly, Matt, you coming from Africa, you're very familiar with exactly what's going on. But quite frankly, this isn't something that is happening somewhere else. This is going to be a global challenge. I'm born and raised in California. And what we see, what's going on with the California water table, we're really in trouble. So we absolutely have to start being a little bolder and moving faster with some of the solutions, both on a local level and certainly on a global level. So I think the changes between COP last year to COP this year, this year seemed to be much more grounded on what can we actually do and how do we finance those things to move forward, which is an integral part, because you can have the best innovations, but if there isn't the capital to be able to support it scaling, then it's not going to get out there.
Well, we're going to come back to your capital raising efforts. You've raised $2 million to date, so congrats on that. We'll come back to that. So, what have you built, and what are you currently building? So it's a farm in a box. So how does this thing actually play out? So I'm a farmer, Matt, Farmer Brown. I'm finally, I finally got to use that saying on my own show. Okay, cool. So Farmer Brown here. I'm a farmer. I'm doing like, let's say corn, right? So corn in the Cobb Farms. When do I engage with you, and like walk us through like how your solution actually plays out in the real world?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, just by the fact that we're dealing with outdoor agriculture, there's no single solution of how it is that we approach it. So my first step would be, Farmer Brown, where are you? Are you only wanting to grow corn, or do you want to diversify that? Are you looking to grow that corn and or other crops for income purposes, for market, selling? Or is it going to be more for consumption? Or do you own a restaurant and you're serving that? So we initially go through this assessment, because each one of our farms, again, by nature of the fact that we're working with the variables of outdoor agriculture, we have to configure our unit to be able to fit what your farm plan is and what your location is. So this has actually been one of our challenges, and now I think is actually one of our greatest value points, which is we've built this modular system that can respond to a number of different variables. Oh, you hear a dog in the background.
It's all good. I have young children. It's fine.
We're incorporating some livestock basically
Yeah,
into
exactly.
the
I
Farmer
know.
Brown conversation. So in the fact that we're dealing with all of these different variables, we need to figure out how do we configure the right amount of solar power to meet the right type of pumping, and how much of an acreage are we actually going to be able to provide for.
Mm.
I'm going to pause for a moment because I can't even hear myself quite yet.
Yeah, you go. I'll play elevator music so long. So you do actually, I didn't realize that. So you do actually customize the solution specifically for the farmer. I didn't actually realize that that was the case. So do farmers know what they need? Because it's like this whole thing around faster horses. Like if you go to, what do you need? I don't know. I would like
Yeah.
a faster horse. So do farmers know what they need, or how much of sort of strategic guidance are you providing them so that they get the right solution fit?
Yeah, some do. And some could use a little bit of guidance. It also just depends on where they are within their agricultural journey. Are they an existing farm that simply needs to upgrade their infrastructure to be something that is going to provide more cost savings? Or are they expanding their existing acreage to be able to cover more land? And we just sort of are that plug in infrastructure that can help them expand that. Or are they a brand new farmer that just got land, and we can help take that guesswork out of how to get it started? Or maybe it's a hospital network, which is something that we're starting to get into. How can you start localizing on-site fresh food production for your staff and for your patients or for your customers? And we just sort of plug in to what that existing acreage of space that they may have at their access can be. So it's a little bit of both.
Mm.
We provide guidance, and sometimes we can also just fill the order, if you will, based off of what it is that somebody is really looking for. And there's one other important point, now that I can hear myself a bit beyond the barking, is the idea of this configuration. Um, when we first designed this, we were very sort of grounded in hardware systems, power, water, internal cold storage, and we've since kind of expanded out a little bit beyond that. But without having to get stuck in this customization loop every single time we do a deployment, we've had to deploy in different climates and with different users so that we could basically develop different kits that could respond to those different variables, if you will. So we now are sort of almost able to plug in different kits like a Lego system, all within this one sort of standardized structure, so that it can be quickly responding to an East Coast farm, to a farm in Southern California, to a farm in Tanzania, to a farm in Liberia. We can plug in and plug out different components without having to customize the solution each and every time too, which is going to be key for our growth.
And so is this like Tetris? Could you have more than one, you know what I mean? Like you got one thing doing, one unit doing one thing, or maybe two things, you know what I mean? Like, and then you can basically plug and play them.
Yeah,
Is that kind of like how it works?
100%. So, for example, we have a farm that is in South Dakota. And I'm new to working in South Dakota. And until doing this farm, I've had very limited time working in South Dakota. But my God, South Dakota has some of the most extreme temperatures that we have ever seen. And so we've had to make sure that our system can not only help support commercial production of food crops through, spring and through summer, but how could we also extend that growing season into these really harsh, severe winters and use the power that's generated as a part of our farm from a box system to help support extra heating to go into the high tunnels, so that we can extend that growing season and increase the production, whereas they wouldn't have been able to necessarily have that before. So it's that plus or minus of, as you said, Tetris. We're like, okay, for this one, we're going to add a little bit more power. We'll make sure that we have additional external power plugs. For this one, we may have less power, but increase the size of the drip irrigation because they're in a really arid climate. So we can plus or minus the different components to make sure that it's responsive.
And in theory, if you were a commercial farmer, you could have, say, like 10 of these units at different locations of these, well, of the farm for whatever geographical reasons, like one gets more sun, and you know what I mean. Like you could be on, like, I suppose there's some parts of, like, when it snows here, it's amazing. Like on one part of the property, it's completely melted, but on the other, it will literally stay for weeks just because of the shadow and the time of the
Yeah.
year. So so then you would have, like, say 10 of these things on one massive commercial farm. Do they then communicate to each
Hmm.
other? And then what's the role of data
Yeah.
in sort of intelligent farming or precision farming here?
Some really good questions there. So you brought something up that I think is really important because this is a part of our sort of business learnings, which there have been many certainly. One of the things that we're doing now, which we didn't really foresee on the horizon early on, is this idea of a decentralized regional solution. And this really didn't come into our world pre-COVID, quite frankly. Now it seems very obvious, but it was one of those that we just realized at that moment when we saw this breakdown in supply chains. At how can we deploy our drop-in, decentralized, independently powered system into different areas to be able to localize food production and make sure that we're shortening those supply chains and regionally uplifting production so that it's not as dependent on these complex distribution channels. So, to your point, what does that allow? That allows a few different things to happen. One, you can grow different crops. So, that opens up that depending on the area. Two, because we have this sort of smart farm where it's all of these hardware components that I mentioned earlier, but also interconnected with this IoT system that allows each one of these farms to be able to basically communicate what's going on the farm. Tell us, how do you optimize the energy and water use? If your water filter needs to be changed, what your battery state of charge is, human error things like, hey, by the way, somebody left the door of the cold storage open, so you're using way too much energy right now. You may go close that. It helps us be able to make sure that each one of the farms is functioning as optimally as it can. But it also, in this example of a regionalized solution, opens up how can you communicate and be able to track what's going on with different production levels and harvest levels for each one of those farms. So, in your example, if you've got 10 different farms within a certain region, this basically allows us to be able to say, okay, Farmer Brown, farm number one, or however it is that you want to call it. We always name all of our boxes. Farm number one has just harvested 40,000 pounds of strawberries, and we're about to start, harvesting XYZ. Meanwhile, farm number seven is about to start harvesting all of the kale and all of whatever crop is growing there. This also allows purchasing to be optimized according to what is going on with each one of those farms. So it just gives us the heads up. The other thing, which now this is what happens, is I always start to get excited and just talk a little bit more. But here's the other perfect example. It also just helps make sure that everything is working on a very foundational level. We have a farm that's out in Tanzania that we did with the World Food Program years ago, and it's out in the Kigoma region of Tanzania, so a very, very, very remote location. And at one point in time, the farmers had sent us a panicked WhatsApp message saying the pump stopped working, and they were concerned that their entire crop was going to go down, which they at this point were dependent on not only for their household consumption but also for their income. And somebody's uncle from a neighboring village was about to come and start dissecting this really high tech pump that we have. And we're like, no, 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 don't touch the pump, don't touch the pump. And from our office, we were able to see that on either side of the water filter, the flow of water had significantly decreased. So it was a matter of flushing the water filter because the water source, which at that location with a river, the seasonality just had too much silt in it. So rather than expensively having to, fly out to Tanzania to be able to address it or bring a whole team in or have something happen to the pump, we're able to remedy that situation remotely. So that's the other big factor with having this data system is it gives us that absolute ability to be able to really sort of triage what's going
Mm.
on the ground without having to go there.
Mm-hmm. It's truly amazing. I've been showing all the cool stuff from your website on the show. So, and also the Tanzania example, and just on that, like obviously as you touched on, like I'm originally from Africa. I'm quite interested in where you feel the need is most. You know what I mean? Like because it's so innovative, it can live in developed markets or emerging markets. Where would you say though? I know it's a big question, but where would you say is the need for farm in a box most acute?
Oh boy. Well, you're kind of hitting at the core of my passion right here. And the need, unfortunately, is pretty great in a lot of different locations. We initially came up with the concept of farm from a box while working in sub-Saharan Africa. And so that's still very foundational to our view. We work in different refugee settlements. And so when you're talking about a very acute need, acute hunger is about as much of a need as you can possibly get. So that is a very real situation when we're looking at the increase of crises, be it civil crises, be it environmental crises, natural disasters, starting to swell up more and more frequently. That is also a very acute need for having a deliverable system come in and be able to help quickly jumpstart food production within that direct community. Uh, and that's also kind of been a part of our learnings. Again, so many learnings as with any company that's learning and growing. But we are now finding ways where we can serve the users that have a very acute need um, in different ways, so that rather than necessarily taking the philanthropic UN approach, as we have done in the past, we're now able to work on a B2B level and say, hey, how can we help increase and fortify your already existing supply chains and still serve the people that you're sourcing from to make sure that their individual household needs are met and they've got significant livelihood access to be able to continue growing in a profitable way and stay in the communities that they're in versus migrate.
Mm-hmm.
So we've taken different approaches. And going back to your question of where is the acute need, it's really all over. Again, I could go back to the example of our farm that we have in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. That's probably one of the most severely malnourished places on U.S. soil, is right there. And so now they're growing a commercial farm, not only for their food consumption, but also for the broader communities
Mm.
with income generation too. So
Cool.
it's pretty broad, unfortunately.
Well, that's great for you, right? Because then at
Yeah.
least you get to scale, and you get to make a difference at the same time. So just on the first piece there around scale, like how hard is it to scale this thing? I mean, obviously, if you're saying like the need is everywhere and it's so acute, and yes, farms in Dakota, Tanzania, emerging markets, South Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, where you built this thing, firsthand, kind of like who needs this thing. And if it is so, if the need is so acute everywhere, how do you scale to service that need? Because it's not like it's not a SaaS software application. You know what I mean? It's actually quite a complicated technical product that you guys have created. Innovative, yes. Is it difficult to scale? Like how, for instance, to do 1,000 of these things, like, or one of these things, like how long does it take to create it, move it to the destination, and then put it on the ground, and then once it's there, for it to actually then start to create the outcomes that you hope. So, how do you scale something like this?
Yeah. I think number one on a very macro level is we've had to focus because the need is so big and because we have gotten outreach from Mongolia and Bhutan to Australia, we've had to make sure that we keep ourselves focused, and that's been difficult, to be honest. So one way in which we've really sort of leaned into laying that foundation for scale has been to work with the modularity of the system and to localize the actual fabrication of the system as well, so that we, in the same way that we're saying there's challenges with the centralized food system, we're decentralizing even the fabrication of our systems so that we're not purely dependent on fabricating them only in the US and shipping them all over. So the example with that is within the United States itself, we have fabrication hubs in Florida, in Texas, and in California. So that if we're getting an order from somewhere on the East Coast, we're not shipping from California or vice versa. So we make sure that we're trying to regionalize and localize the fabrication of these in those different zones as much as possible. That also allows us to have multiple fabrication points happening all at one time. So that helps lean into the volume of it. Internationally, we've done the same exact thing. So with this farm that we did in Tanzania, we were bold enough and insightful enough. And thank God, now that I'm looking at things with COVID, thank God we took this approach. We actually set up local fabrication directly there in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, so that we weren't shipping it through, which is costly, expensive, and slow to grow. Incredibly costly now, as we're seeing with different fuel prices. So we've done that. We've set it up in Tanzania. We've set it up through partners that we can replicate that with in Uganda, in Kenya. We're looking to do the same now with West Africa. And so keeping it focused on those key targeted areas where we think that we can have the most opportunity and the most impact is really has been key to our approach.
It's so cool. I love it. Take my money.
Yeah. Farmer
Just
Brown, we're gonna
just
do
take it.
this.
We're gonna do my own farm, dude. Those like life goals. Just farm from a box just right here outside my condo.
The other thing that you said too about how it's, and for anybody that's had the opportunity of being able to see the unit on the website, it is this technological piece that comes in. And so the fact that we have worked with such a range of people, some people that are brand new to seeing technology like this, some people that are really skilled with technology, it really ranges. But because we're pre-installing all of that and pre-testing it and providing training on how to use and maintain the system, it then becomes this technological capacity building system as well, where the thing that's interesting about that is I have to bring up women and youth with this in a lot of different areas. And this is not just within the US, but certainly globally. Classically, women farmers do not have access to a lot of the technologies that would help them up level their production to a commercial level beyond subsistence. So we want to fill that gap. The other challenge is that we're facing an aging farmer population. And this is a global challenge, whether we're talking in the US or anywhere else. Farmers are aging out, and youth, for the most part, are really not that interested in farming anymore. So there's been this renaissance that we're seeing in a lot of different areas. And I'm so thankful to see that happen, because if we don't have farmers of our future, we're really in trouble. But because this is a smart farm and it's using clean technology, and you can pull up your cell phone and be able to track what's going on the farm, it changes the paradigm of what a vocation in agriculture looks like. And so that's also really interesting in opening up other opportunities, whether we're working with, returning military veterans, trying to look into a different type of vocation, or whether we're looking at kids growing up and getting into a different vocation. It becomes this nice hub of learning too.
Yeah, there's a lot of extensions, isn't there, just from the product itself to the ecosystem. To say, okay, cool, here's the issues that the entire sector actually faces in the now, but then also in the future. To your point around, nobody who's growing up these days going, hey, I want to be a farmer. They want to be like a Instagram influencer, or
Exactly.
or as my son Franklin says, I want to be a YouTuber. Oh, Dad, you got your own YouTube channel.
Oh,
That's the world now.
yeah,
And that's just unfortunate.
it is. And when we look at what's going on in the world, there's this other side of it too, where we really, on a foundational level, need to make sure that we're building independence in our systems and localization in our systems and stability in our systems. And so again, it's that spectrum of like, I want to be a YouTuber, and how do we make sure that we fortify ourselves for a really good, productive, healthy future? And that's not going to be through, squeezable food. We need real nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. So, doing something like this, you obviously made a lot of mistakes. We all do, building something well, that's as cool as what you guys have done. So what would you say has been your greatest failure in this journey so far, and what did you learn from it?
Mm, trying to hone down on my greatest failure is actually tricky because there's been so many. And to be honest with you, I think, um, you know, and you tell me your perspective on this, but I feel like as an entrepreneur, you really need to embrace failure and just kind of be like, okay, to hell with it. That one didn't work, but let's learn from that. And now we know that that's not the path. So what can we do to be able to reframe it so that we can move forward more successfully? So as painful as they have been, those things are ripe, potent learning lessons. So I think one of them early on that I can certainly mention that was a painful one is when we first had this idea of what we could build with this modular drop-in kit. We thought that we needed to have a design firm design it for us. And we went through so much wasted time going to different design firms that would tell us, no, it's not possible. Sure, it's going to cost you $250,000, to my favorite one, which was, yes, we could do it, but we're going to own all of the IP, but we're willing to license it to you, which was insane. So we lost time in going through that exercise, where in the end, we just decided, screw it. We know how to do this. I'm a welder. We could just get a beater box and just design it and build our first prototype and do it. And so that's what we ultimately ended up doing. So sometimes, whether it's at a fabrication question like that with getting your first prototype out, or whether it's pitching to investors or doing your first stage talk, or really sort of punching above your weight class, if you will, with some of the clients that you're really trying to pitch a project to, we just have to get up and do it and have that confidence in it that if it's a no, it's a no. Who cares? Move forward. But you got to jump in and try. And I think early on, given that I'm a first time founder and so is my co-founder, there was maybe a confidence issue there. We're like, we think we need to follow a certain path, where in reality, we don't. And we're actually much better when we didn't do that. We like to really work with strategic partners that help accelerate us and help inform what our perspective is and help us sort of illuminate the blind spots. But there's a lot that we can also just innately do and follow our gut with.
Mm.
And to step into that confidence a little sooner is something that I wish we would have done, but at the same time, trial by learning. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think intuition's such a underrated skill. Like I think we often, to your point, there's a doctrine, isn't there? Well, you've got to do it this way. You have to scale like this. You have to raise money like that, and you have to talk to these VCs. Otherwise, you're not, you know what I mean? Like it's not credible. It's against like the current status quo. And I think one of the things, to echo your point, that I've learned is like intuition's really a skill that you can develop. It's an intelligent thing. Apart from the sirens going off in the back there. New York, baby.
New
New York,
York, New
baby.
York,
You gotta
baby.
love
We've
it.
always got
Fucking
sirens.
dogs. Dogs, fire trucks. It's amazing. I love it. Yeah, so, and it is an intelligence. You know what I mean? It's like that whisper in your head. Then you're like, and it nags at you. You know what I mean?
I agree. I agree with you completely. And it's an intelligence that can also be honed, and you've got to practice it. You've got to advance it. And the more we push aside those instinctual feelings and those gut feelings, we're not exercising that. The more that we actually listen to it and trust it, I think it's a really important thing to be able to follow your gut on that. And that's been another one of my failures, where, again, sometimes there's this shiny star of a person or a company, and I think, oh God, like if only, like if this person's really got it together, I should listen to them, or this company's really doing, I should listen to them. But then what I'm hearing back from them is so different from what it is that I really believe to be true, and you kind of get that gut alarm.
mm.
Following that and listening to it early on can save a lot of time.
And I imagine you get that same nagging voice when you talk to a potential investor and they're telling you why it won't work or why it's not for them, and they give you like these ridiculous reasons. oh, it can't scale, it's not the right time, maybe you should look at another, you know what I mean? Like there's always
Oh my gosh, all
it's,
the time.
it's ridiculous. So on the funding thing, how have you found in the market currently? What was your experience, or what has your experience been like raising capital now? Has
Yeah.
it been like easier than you expected, harder than you expected? Because obviously you're not like a software as a service story, right? You're almost like sustainable infrastructure. So, how was your experience? Like harder, easier?
Hard as
Okay.
hell.
Mm.
So I think there's a few different factors that came into this. One, to your point, we aren't a SaaS technology, and so that in some ways it's not as attractive to certain types of investors. A big engineered hardware system, even though it's a hardware and software system, infrastructure is not as sexy to a lot of different investors, although it's really foundational to our global economy. That's kind of the way that it is. So, I remember at one point in time, I was in this pitch competition and I made it up into the top two, and it was for impactful companies. And for this particular impactful company pitch contest, top two, we were so excited. We're like, yes, we hit this mark, this mark. We're a benefit corporation. Environmentally, we're able to achieve this. Socially, we're able to achieve this. And we lost. We lost to a nail decal startup company. And so sometimes you just are like, you're either the right fit or you're not the right fit, but you just got to keep going forward. So we've tried a few different things in our fundraising journey. We've tried crowdfunding. We've worked with angel investors. And to be honest with you, what we're finding now to be the most successful is to really align with strategic partners that we can not only grow with because we're able to provide benefit to them, but we've got a big investor that we're bringing in right now that we signed a distribution agreement with. So it's mutually beneficial for both. We're able to help, be one of their products under their distribution channels, and they're able to really help us accelerate and scale to a level that we quite frankly may not have been able to get to without their assistance at this point. So finding the right alignments has really taken some time, and it has been tricky. Also, as a female-founded company, there's definitely some very stark percentages in terms of what access female founders do get. So we've had to make sure that we align with our investors as wisely as we possibly can.
Yeah, so we need more female founders such as yourselves. I think the numbers suck. They're like, I don't know, it's like single digit percentages of
It's
all
abysmal.
VC. It's a total
Yeah.
fuck up. I don't understand why though. You know what I mean? Like I know, like in my people, guys, ladies rather, that have been on the show. Amazing founders. I went to a networking event recently. Like half a woman. Like I don't understand why those numbers suck so much. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big societal question there too. But we
Yeah.
also, in addition to more female founders, which, God, there's so many kick-ass ones out there that are just doing incredible work. We also need more female investors. So just across the board, we also need
Mm.
more women, farmers getting fully engaged. So we just got to make sure that we're really up leveling that across the board. But that
Hmm.
that has that has also not been the easiest.
No. But I do like your thinking around going through strategic partners to help you scale and invest, and it's a very smart way to solve the problem without to what we were discussing just earlier was following the standard doctrine. Do you know what
That's
I mean?
right. Yeah.
Um,
And without overly diluting too quickly. If we can make sure that we're finding the right mutual alignments where there's good benefits, then it isn't purely a matter of an investment transaction, but instead we can really uplevel what we can do as a company through those strategic alignments. And sometimes that's really non-dilutive too, which has been fantastic for us.
yeah, exactly. That's amazing. That's really really cool. Tell me, where do I want to go from here? Let's see. So if I want to have a bit of fun, let's do something fun. So I want to give
Let's
you
do it.
I want to give you the keys to the Matt Brown Show time machine. Uh, so So if you could go back to yourself on day one, think about all the stuff you've learned in the process of building this business, what advice would you give yourself about building from a box?
Mm. Ooh, this time machine is a good question. Uh, I would alert myself that it's going to be longer than I imagine. It's going to be more difficult than I imagine. And it's going to turn out way better than what I'm currently imagining. So, to make sure that myself then had a little bit more of a realistic expectation in terms of timelines and performas and like all of this as entrepreneurs it's like you put the best possible planning forward and it's just going to change, and so that's really just sort of putting that roadmap forward to you. So I think one thing that probably would have helped me was to know that those timelines in some ways are just made up. And if I could just start by working backwards from what I'm ultimately trying to achieve, recognizing that that road may look really different on the actual pathway, then I think I would have been able to have a little bit of a different vision of
Mm.
of what the forward sense pathway would have looked like. Maybe that's my own time machine, is I needed to make sure that I was reversing it along the way, because when you start off, you're like, oh yeah, on year 3, I'm going to do this, and this is what it's going to look like, and this is how it's going to be, and this is who we're going to work with. And our product is so much better than what we had initially imagined. And
Mm.
the people that we're working with are really incredible. And I wouldn't have necessarily been prepared to see some of those gifts of uncertainty and of failure along the way. And so also of the time expectation, I think.
Yeah,
Great question.
it's it's that yeah, I mean it's like, never confuse a short line of sight, well, a clear line of sight with a short distance. It takes 15 years to become an overnight success. And I hear you. Like I hear you about the struggle, and how it's kind of like that zigzag thing. Like you thought you were going there, but actually you went there, and actually that door that closed was actually a gift because it opened up another one. Like I think there's a song, Taylor Swift, I think. Sorry, Katy, what's her name? Katy Perry. She, in her song "Smile," she sings about that same thing that happened to her, where she was also like lost and blah blah blah, and then suddenly it was actually
Mm-hmm.
she was actually being saved from a problem. You know what I mean? Like that she,
Completely.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
I have a quick question for you. Like, I do believe like you're the business. Well, there's the business that you are, and then there's the business that you're becoming. Like you said, you this infrastructure story, but then you also the technology piece. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you farm from a box today, but in 5 years' time, you could still be farming a box, but doing something else. You know what I mean? Like same thing, but gone into a different space that you never anticipated. So, um, what would you say? Speaking about vision, like what kind of a business are you becoming?
Oh, also another really good question, Matt. You're giving me some good ones. Yeah, we have really evolved. And sometimes they're short-term evolutions, sometimes they're long-term evolutions. This approach that we really took on as a result of COVID has changed a lot of things for us in a really beneficial way. So where are we going now on the current path that I could potentially foresee on the horizon? Um, a lot has been done on this data aspect, but there's also a lot of other companies that are already doing it and doing it better than we are currently. So ours is really tailored specifically to what it is that we can provide. What I ultimately think that we will evolve into, because as we've gotten better with the product, the hardware product, and with the software product, suddenly it starts to get really exciting when I see the different links that we can make when we layer on already existing solutions. And I think this lends itself really well to scale as well. So
Mm.
An example of that is uh, farm from a box. Great. We already know that we can be dropped into an area and we can increase production. We can increase high quality production for market sales. Fantastic. What if there's no market? What if there needs to be improved market access? If we're working with somebody like MasterCard, MasterCard has created the MasterCard Farmer Network. They are using their amazing, grandiose capabilities to be able to put together a platform that connects cooperative SME producers like what we work with direct large scale buyer access, cutting out that intermediary. So that becomes one of those win-wins for us. So to answer your question, I think I'm going to see us moving more in those directions of how do we make those really creative, sort of out of the box, innovative partnerships where we can achieve more by working together and faster than we could if we were actually doing it on our own. I actually get really excited by those things. So that's just one example. Another one is I'm fortunate enough to be a member of the Explorers Club, which is this group founded in 1904 of a bunch of badass people that have just done incredible things around the globe, famous firsts, out to space, down to the Marianas Trench. But it's also a bunch of conservationists and technologists at this point. So some of the things that I'm speaking with the space crew, if you will, about what is currently happening in space that can inform what's happening on Earth, that can be integrated into our system. And we don't necessarily have to be the only one doing that. But again, through these really innovative complementary relationships, we can achieve a lot more by doing it. So that's my answer, which I actually didn't even expect to come out of my mouth.
Well, I think about Africa and how, like, you could, as an example, you could get, if you think about this decentralized farming network, right? That the cooperative space is really interesting. And then, obviously, then that represents decentralized finance. So being able to finance your farm and so there's definitely a financial inclusion piece here, because especially in emerging markets, dude, people are financially excluded, so it's definitely a thing. And if Visa's doing it, like, hey, there you go.
Yeah.
Like, there's your thing.
Which also just goes to show the business opportunity of it at the same time. So when you have this huge market segment that is not fully included in the market, that represents a massive market opportunity to be able to really include them and up-level them too. So yeah, that's where I think it gets really exciting. I had no idea that I was going to find infrastructure or decentralization as sexy as I do now, but those are the things that just really excite me when we start talking about it because of the potential for being able to really achieve incredible things that leave a huge impact. And technology at this point really enables us to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Well, Brandi, it's time to wrap up. It's been a privilege having you here. I think what you guys are doing is so cool. Like, I genuinely dig it. And I think, what I like about it specifically is kind of like you're making a difference, you're mission driven, it's impact and it's profit. It's like and I can clearly see like no one else is going to come and solve your your thing. You know what I mean? It's like it's a barrier to entry is quite steep, I would suggest.
Yeah, it is. It is. And thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. We're big believers that business is meant for good. You can do a lot of good and make a lot of money at the same time. And the two don't have to be mutually exclusive. So I think now's definitely the time for businesses, whether they're small ones, growing ones, big ones, as we've seen certainly lately, to be able to make some pretty monumental impacts. And that's an exciting spot to be in.
And to do it quickly or relatively quickly. I think
Yeah,
that's
we
also
need your time machine
I know,
taking
right?
everything forward.
I know, God, if only. Imagine how scary would that be? Holy shit. Imagine if someone could show you, like, hey, if someone had come to me like 8 years ago and said, yo, dude, like, here's my time machine, whatever it is. And they said, you're like, go out 8 years in the future and look at the Matt Brown show. Like, I would have been, no. Not possible, bro. you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it 8 years is it's really not a lot of time
It's really
to
not a
be
lot of
honest.
time.
Feels like a lot, but it really isn't.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's kind of an amazing thing when we can look back and surprise ourselves with that too.
I know.
So, yeah, I mean, eight
Exactly.
years from now, who knows? Who
Or
knows? But
cringe. Or cringe. You could always go back. Yeah. Don't
exactly. I'm
listen
sure
to
a
the first
combination of
episode.
both.
Yeah, exactly. Never listen to the first episode. I never listen to my own stuff because I'm like, oh God, did I say that? Anyway. But look, it's been a privilege having here. Thank you everybody for sticking around, and we'll see you all again soon. Cheers, Brandi.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.